preparing to go live.
That says we're
We
live.
are live streaming.
On Facebook. Cool.
Yes. What's going on, guys? So technically we're a few minutes early, but Rory and Malcolm were riffing, and I was like, oh man, I'm just gonna hit live now because they do this all the time. Like the cool conversation happens oftentimes, but it's not being broadcast, recorded, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's, you know, I hit record on that stuff quite a bit. So the hidden Chiron files someday.
Gone to seminars and stuff, and the best part of where you learn the most was either at the after seminar drinks or muscling and having lunch with the host.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about presentation and what, so presentation, I think it was a guy, the suited shootist I heard say presentation is your first line of defense, or he might've said close are your first line of defense. But the place I originally really heard it was, of course, as always, my dad was like, the appearance of weakness invites aggression. His thing was, if you want people to prey on you, you appear weak. Now, the interesting thing about that was the responsibility therein. It implied, A, you have a choice about how you appear, and B, you're responsible for the outcome. So obviously you can't, and my dad's not the biggest guy in the world. He's 5'6" maybe, and was always relatively skinny, but his thing was, I am going to project strength. So I could be 4'2", and you're going to think this kid will crawl up my leg up onto my chest and bite my throat out before he's going to let me victimize him. So it makes me wonder, as we were talking about earlier, how much of presentation is a choice, and as a result, how much of the outcome becomes one's responsibility if we accept it as a choice. What do you guys think?
Mr. Miller.
I think that once you see that almost everything is a choice, your world gets way more open. You have way more possibilities, but like Malcolm was pointing out, what we were talking about on the chat, those all come with costs too. And a lot of people seem to just be avoiding the cost of personal responsibility. Because if it is a personal choice, it becomes a personal responsibility, and you have to own the outcome as well as the event. And
you realize that's a no less than 1 hour deep dive on a whole different topic.
But I think there are fair ways to say these are all choices and acknowledge all of the other elements. So like I shortened it down to, I think I might have said this to you guys before. I don't remember. I don't know. It might have been a little while ago. The structure might create the choice. The culture might weight the choice. You still have to make the choice. So the bottom line is, no matter how much you are dominated by the outside factors, allegedly or actually, you still have room to act. A shitty choice is still a choice. And that's a tough thing. I think that's a tough thing to sell, because people don't like the idea that no matter what else happened, you still have a choice.
And you get into the disconnect between the self-defense world and the real world a lot. But one of the basic things is that people want to be able to face violence and overcome all this stuff and blah, 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 and have no consequences. And that's not the way life works. It never has.
It can't. It's not just that it never has. It can't. There is no way you're going to survive 25 shootings and have no friction, no leftovers, no soreness, no nothing, no nightmares, no, it has to cost, or else everyone would do it. We don't want to think about a world where violence is free. There's no imperative not to.
You still have to make the choice. The other half is that not making the choice also has consequences.
Absolutely.
And just as everyone that dies is their deathbed wishes are not regretting, that they didn't follow the herd better. No one thinks that. The consequences of choosing not to choose, of not making the choice, is also going to have consequences, and those consequences can be just as dark.
Or darker.
So I prefer autonomy as a personal preference. The making the choices, it's like this could have a totally bad outcome, but it'll be my outcome. And I'd rather have it be my outcome than someone else's choice.
And I think that's at the heart of most self-protection concepts. It is accepting the choice and therein the responsibility. So if I'm going to walk around preparing myself for potential violence, I am accepting that I am responsible for managing this situation that might occur, and I've got the responsibility for the outcome. And I think people want to pick and choose which parts they're ready to be responsible for. It's like, okay, I want to be responsible for violence, but I don't want to be responsible for, eating right or my medical care or whatever else. I don't want any of that shit. I just want to be able to be responsible for beating people up and shooting them because that's exciting, versus being responsible for the full spectrum and just making informed choices and accepting those outcomes. If I'm going to make crazy, you know what? I'm going to take the value judgments out of it. If I'm going to make decisions with relatively predictable results, I need to just be ready to wear those results.
But we can never take the value judgments out of it. You're going to be judging yourself. You're going to be judging others. And
Fair.
that's based on your values. So if one of your values is autonomy, there's no guarantee you're going to win. And that's one of the other things. But if I'm going to lose, I want to lose on my terms. I am going to die. I want to die well by my definition of dying.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, by my definition of well.
Well, both.
Dying pretty much just has one definition. But that's the core of, I think, almost everything we're trying to do is getting people to realize that they're players, not pawns.
Yeah.
You can choose to be a pawn, and that's a choice. And it's I can't throw my values on it because it's your choice. If it makes your life more comfortable to just go with the flow, drift, have an external locus of control, everything you do is caused by, everything you do was caused by your genetics or your circumstances or blah, blah, blah. Therefore, none of this is on me. If that makes you happier, go with it. I don't have the right to tell you not to. It's just would be a very unhappy way for me to live.
Yeah. And I think that's, for me, the informed decision part is all I care about. I don't care that people make this choice or that one. I just want them to know what they're signing up for. Mm-hmm. So if you were signing up for the responsibility part, just be ready for what that comes with. Don't sign up for responsibility and power, but not be ready to deal with that potential outcome that involves that responsibility and that power. So if we talk about the self-protection people, it's all the people who want a world without pain. You want to win every fight, just completely destroy the guy and then have no negative follow-up. Nothing should ever hurt or be difficult or be hazardous or challenge you in some way. I think it's a dangerous thought. It's part of the reason that so much of the physical stuff weirds me out, because you've got this idea that this thing is going to work 100% of the time with 100% of the people you're dealing with, no matter what else happens, even if you're drunk or the other guy hits you first or whatever else. And it just doesn't work like that. All you get, to quote a guy with an interesting sweater today, all you get sometimes is the fight.
I'm quoting Mark Zupan on that one.
Okay, well, I'm sure he has an interesting sweater too. Paul, what do you think?
Well, my internet dropped out. Did I miss the switch over to presentation management, or did we just dive right down the rabbit hole of locus control?
That's a fair point. That's a fair question. So presentation management. The interesting.
I think we're gonna have to talk about the locus control in our follow-up call.
Yeah, that might be a fireside chat one. The presentation management thing to me is interesting because I was reading comments somewhere about one of Rory's books, and somebody was like, this idea that everything I wear is part of some structured concept is crazy to me. Like, no, I just wear whatever's there. And I'm like, well, how do you think you made the decision to buy the thing in the first place?
Right.
what went into you deciding to purchase it? Chances are something, some sort of societal norms, some sort of basic expectations, etc. And so presentation management to me is about accepting that you can control how you project and to some degree how other people see you, and taking that responsibility to project what you think would be useful.
So two things. Number one, earlier today, the wife was going through and cleaning out a closet and clothes I have not seen in probably 7 to 8 years. And she pulls the shirt out. I was like, is that mine? I don't remember that thing. I would never wear that today. So there's a whole conversation to be had about what was 7, 8, what's buried in the back of your closet. You're like, when the hell did I buy that? Why did I buy that? More importantly, when the hell did I fit into that thing? Because it's been quite a while. The follow-up to that is, you and I are both currently wearing what I like to refer to as discoverable clothing.
Notice where my camera is?
Yeah, I know. Well, see, mine's more comical in nature. So the jiu-jitsu, the art of folding clothes with people still in it, and the other option is involuntary yoga. So, comical in nature, but it definitely tells the world something. And I tend to, Rory and I've talked about this many times. I have a whole series of shirts that are either at my academy or at a seminar, and that's the only place they get worn. When I'm going to the grocery store, they don't go to the grocery store with me. I'm being conscious of that. I am personally partial, like a lot of guys, to cargo pants because male purses are less socially acceptable. So I have gone out of my way to find cargo pants that are less conspicuous than the prototypical 511s or whatever. Things along that line. So being aware, being conscious, and making, you have the right to choose to wear whatever you want, and the rest of the world around you has the right to make whatever decision they will about what you chose to wear. In some cases, some people have uniforms. You don't have an option, but that's usually a work thing for the most part. I do 100% not straight up subscribe to the wear the uniform, but if it's temperature time, you're going to see me wearing very close to the similar, like Paul has a uniform. It's a red hoodie and a red hat. And it's pretty common most of the time. So
it's fair.
That cat looks very happy.
Yeah, he's all right, I guess. Sheds
the presentation thing to me is about the static stuff and the flexible stuff. The static stuff is stuff that is usual, that you can't change within reason. It would take you a lot of money and a lot of hassle to change. Like Paul, you're what, 6'2", right?
Yes.
You could be 5'4" if we had a chainsaw and some tourniquets, but you wouldn't be 5'4" for very long. And so
was that a South Park episode where one of the kids wanted to be taller, so he had leg extensions sewed on or something?
I think I missed that one. But I think people think more of the presentation stuff is static than actually is. So like they might think the surface level sort of like, whether or not I wear Oakley's or I wear another brand of sunglasses, whereas I think a lot of times it can be more about things like body language, posture, and then the other sort of less obvious elements of presentation that do communicate a lot, because two people can wear the same Metro West Jiu-Jitsu hoodie completely differently and be the exact same size, height, body language, build, etc., but just project very differently. Rory, what do you think?
It's the intent is projectable, it's discernible, intensity, alertness. It goes into one of the things that Paul needs to talk about at some point is his interpretation of Zanshin. Because that's, getting into, and it's not mystical. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's easier to talk about in mystical language, but it's not mystical at all. And
there's a term for it, Rory. It's mind map, right?
Yeah.
At least the way I approach it. A 30-second elevator pitch. Japanese concept Zanshin is awareness of where you are in space and what's in the space around you. You can get a little mystical with like total awareness of your being but the concept that you're familiar with the physical space that you're in. And having worked with people in the fitness world and in the self-defense world, some people are so profoundly disconnected from their physical presence. It staggers me to this day that I can't get people to know where they are, what they're doing. They don't know where their hand is in space and things along that lines. And sometimes it doesn't matter how much training you put into it. It's just doesn't rise to the level of importance, because that's what I figured out that it really is, for them to put that much effort into it. They're a scholar, they're a cerebral, they're a whatever. Some people, I think, self-identify with being clumsy. I truly have gotten to that point where it's like that is their identity, and it would harm them on some level to change from being clumsy.
You know, it's funny. The first thing that popped into my head when you said that was kind of an abdication of athletic responsibility. Like, this is my way of making an excuse beforehand so that when I'm not good at something, I can blame genetics and not the fact that I'm just either not good at it, I didn't try at it, I didn't succeed immediately, so I gave up.
Right.
Huh. It's interesting.
We have this conversation about permission going on, right, in our cohort. And there's the instructor level permission of you give yourself permission to push people past a boundary because you know you can identify the potential and you can see their holdback, and you have to, this is my take, I don't know about the other directors, you got to be okay with nudging, dragging, compelling, because you're like, no, I promise you, worse people than you have made this improvement. We can get you there. You got to buy in. You got to dig. You got to push. You got to pick a word, whatever you like. And the instructor willingness to push in the fitness world is huge. I think it makes up about 90% of the fitness instructor world, frankly, because that's mostly what it is, right? And then in the self-defense world, the people in our realm of self-defense, not the straight up traditional martial arts, we certainly worry about permission with students because we're trying to encourage them to be good at boundary setting, but we know we have to also nudge them on their limits. Otherwise, we're not actually doing our job. And how do we sleep at night balancing those two things? It's a fun conversation to have. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's stared at the ceiling in the middle of the night wondering if I'm doing enough to make my students safer.
And the thing is, there's a whole bunch of things that we acknowledge are important, we acknowledge we want to do, we acknowledge they must be done. And then you think, oh, this is going to sound terrible. And then you think of, 20 or 30 other instructors that you personally think aren't smart enough to make a decision. They shouldn't be allowed to push people. And
I've never had that thought, Rory. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm different.
Yeah. Well, and that's because we fight the being special all the time. But part of teaching is you have to trust your judgment. But you have to trust your judgment because you have good judgment. And the people with bad judgment universally think they have good judgment. So that's why we're all plagued with imposter syndrome, is to keep us from turning into that kind of asshole. And there's a whole bunch of others. I mean, this is a super deep rabbit hole because there's, as far as I know, other than results, how do I tell that I'm not the stupid ego-driven person? And the only way to surround yourself with good friends that'll call you on your bullshit is the only way I know.
I don't know if Rachel's making fun of us or she just said on Facebook, all y'all are special. I'm like, I grew up in Boston in the 90s. Special was not a compliment. That was it's not current kids. Special was not a compliment. But it is 6:01 and it looks like Malcolm froze. So we have to say goodbye to Facebook anyway. As we post up there, guys, all the time, you guys are welcome to join the conversation. We have people in our waiting room. So to respect those people who have, I guess, bought in, is that the right word? Committing their time in their Sunday afternoon with us. We're going to switch over to there. Thank you guys very much for joining us. Rory, Malcolm, thank you guys for covering when my internet glitched out. Appreciate that. Bye, all.
Later, y'all.